Hey there folks, Wrel here. In the background you'll see some gameplay from PlanetSide 2 as I share some thoughts on better gaming. Now you can probably tell by the title of this episode, but today we're going to be talking about player motivation because it's actually pretty tricky. We'll be talking about it primarily from the perspective of a gamer and game design, but who knows, maybe it'll shed some light on what motivates you in the real world. For example, if you've been with this channel for a while now, you've probably noticed that there have been a lot of changes over the past 2 years. You'll see lulls of content for a couple of weeks, and then you'll see massive spikes in production, maybe some new branding or new series, etc., etc. And while there has been inconsistencies in the minutia, I don't think I've ever strayed from the core of what the channel has always been about. The goals have always been basically the same. I developed the channel by creating worthwhile content and use gaming as a catalyst for change, that being the Thoughts on Better Gaming series. In short, I try to give people something interesting that they'll actually care about, and I try to give them a reason to support the channel and be a part of this community. What keeps me playing PlanetSide 2 is the fact that I have an impact on the community. I actually enjoy making videos, I enjoy helping people, and I enjoy interacting with all of you. I could care less about earning experience or progressing my character or what have you. So even when the game sucks super monkey nuts and makes it difficult to create videos, be it because of bugginess or poor fights or dead servers or just not having new stuff to talk about, I know that I can always take a step back and decide to attack it from a different angle. I can reinvent the direction I take to reach my goals, as long as it doesn't tread too far off the beaten path. Now, that's just me, and your motivations for playing PlanetSide 2 probably don't fall in line with that. My motivations, your motivations, both different, and that's only 2 people. Now imagine developing a game with thousands or tens of thousands of players. How do you figure out how to motivate your player base to keep playing? If I have a channel with a specific target audience, I can make sure that the people I cater to are of that target, and that target alone. So basically I can say, this is what the channel is about, this is what we do here, and if you don't like it, you can leave. Likewise, if you're developing a game focused on a certain audience, you can probably get away with telling people the same sort of thing. If you're making the next Battlefield game, you're not necessarily going to care about hooking players who are into hardcore puzzle platformers. But for other games, maybe a massive free-to-play experience like PlanetSide 2, you can't really do that, at least not to the same degree. The players basically are the content, and the more of them you have, the more enjoyable an experience you'll be able to provide, potentially. There are a few different ways to sort through the motivations of players and figure out how they find enjoyment in the games that they play, and the most well-known method of segmentation is something called the Bartle test, which was a test developed off of a paper written by Richard Bartle back in 1996. I've also linked another chart with a more recent categorization theory in the video description, but both charts are basically pointing to the same sorts of things. According to the Bartle test's 4 archetype model, as a player, you're likely an achiever, a socializer, an explorer, or a killer. Achievers are players who pursue the completion of progression lines, so the guy who completes all the quests, the guy who reaches the level cap, and finds the best gear around. This also relates to pursuit of things like directive lines in PlanetSide 2. An example of that type of player would be someone like It's Murda or Kudo Chop. Socializers are players who participate and prefer the social aspects of the game. If the reason you log in as often as you do is because you have a good outfit that you enjoy spending time with, you probably fall into this category. An example of that kind of player would be somebody like STL Youngblood. Explorers are players who want to discover and learn and experiment and, explore, and this is the type of category that I tend to fall into. You should have seen some of the ridiculous and unfinished places I used to find in vanilla World of Warcraft. It's just lots of fun. And lastly, your killers are basically your players who focus on efficiency and competition and challenge and just being noticeably good at the game. This would be somebody like Scourge of the Server. And generally speaking, you probably don't fall flatly into one of these categories. You're likely somewhere in between with a dominant characteristic or two. If you were just one of these archetypes, you probably wouldn't be playing PlanetSide 2. So if you take these sorts of player archetypes and try translating them into a game like PlanetSide 2, how do you create an experience that keeps everybody having a good time, keeps everyone playing, and actually enjoying their interactions with other types of players? In PlanetSide 2, for example, directive lines are great for achievers, and so is the battle rank system, and so is the certification system. Progression weighs very heavily in this game, and you can approach it from a couple of different angles. The ability to take your outfit and just do flash jousting out in the middle of nowhere, or just have a party in your warp gate and generally take the game at your own pace, that's great for socializers. Easter eggs like the old BFR and being able to go roam around the countryside is great for explorers, at least until everything gets old and dry. And fun, open world fights, or competitive events and scrims appeal to the killer archetypes. So what happens when those elements are underrepresented or start to clash with one another? For example, back when the World Domination Series Pre-Season 2 was around, players were incentivized to capture bases and earn points. The easiest way to earn these points was to form up a Zerg and steamroll each base, and as a consequence, the amount of actual fighting happening on a continent dropped considerably, as groups of players were just better off avoiding one another so that they can get the individual rewards. If there's too much of one archetype and not enough of another, the balance won't be there, right? If the achievers are really incentivized to get that fat loot that the WDS is going to give them, then they're going to go pursue that. And even players of other archetypes might join in on that because all the fighting has died down elsewhere. That's not what the killers want to do, but they still want to play the game, so they might as well join the Zerg and do something. Alternatively, players who really didn't care about Zerging around the map would probably just log off and do something else. There are a bunch of different interactions like this happening all of the time. Think about how the directive system has influenced your own gameplay. Do you find or seek out opportunities to farm kills now? And did you used to do that before the directive weapons were released? It's a rhetorical question, but I think it's interesting to think about how your motivations may have been swayed by the game's evolution. Ultimately, in a game like PlanetSide 2, the question would really come down to how do you get the maximum number of players in the game having a good time while also retaining your vision for what the game should be? The answer would be to align the incentives for each player with the overarching theme of your game so that they all work in tandem. Everyone would be moving towards similar goals that create a certain atmosphere, but the paths that they would take to get there would all be different. As for how you would actually go about aligning those incentives in a game like PlanetSide 2, that's probably worth a more focused discussion later. So to end this relatively brief episode, I'd like to give you a little exercise. I want you to let me know which category you feel is underrepresented in your favorite game. It doesn't have to be PlanetSide 2. Then tell me what you'd like to change about the game to cater to that archetype. Then finally, tell me how you think that might shift the balance of the game overall. For example, if you feel that the competitive scene is being underrepresented, and your solution is to create battle islands where outfits can go and request matchups against one another, you'd probably also include that sort of side game could pull players away from the main game, which might be harmful to the overall enjoyment of the player base. Of course, a solution to that would be to integrate that competitive aspect into the live game server to create benefits for all parties, and I think that that's actually something that Solaris was talking about at SOA Live this year. But I digress. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and if you want to explore that question a bit in the comment section, definitely give it a shot. It's a fun exercise. And if not, then maybe you could share what topics you'd like to hear me talk about in future Thoughts on Better Gaming episodes. Thanks very much, folks. Wrel signing off.